All right, folks, this is Don, Bigfoot Neal. Welcome to one of my first stories here on my YouTube page of Bigfoot incidents that I have taken and talked to people about. Let me share this interesting story with you. I am in Ohio County, Kentucky, standing in front of a little pond. About 2 years ago, I received a call from a gentleman that goes squatching with me sometime, Glenn. Glenn said, Brother Don, I've got a friend that's had a Bigfoot incident and he wants to share it. He's very nervous. And he told me the location, and I said, let's meet there. I like to meet at the location. I like to go immediately to a spot where someone has, you understand that. I want to get right into the middle of it. I want to tackle it immediately. And so he said, well, the man's awful nervous and may not do it. It took a lot of coaxing. I keep mentioning this for this reason. A lot of times people's actions and the way they react tell me a whole lot more than their words do. I go by actions and words. Being a minister, licensed ordained minister, 47 years, I've dealt with people. I've studied psychology. I can read people fairly well and to learn to watch people's actions. No claim to be an expert. I just pay attention to people. People's actions will tell you a whole lot. The gentleman was nervous. I said, tell him my brother's coming with me. We're both armed and trying to make him feel comfortable. I'm not armed because of a Bigfoot creature. They're not aggressive usually. If they are, I would never go into the woods ever, believe me. But I wanted to come to this location, to this spot, and the gentleman finally agreed. It was 5 o'clock in the evening. This was a couple of years ago. It was just an hour and a half or so before it started setting sunset. I believe it was late fall. And so Glenn brought his friend, and we came to this spot. And he stood right here, and when the man got out of the car, he was reluctant, he was fidgety, he was fidgeting with his hands. He didn't realize I was watching this. He looked, he was watching the woods over here, and there's a reason why. And he got out and said, let's get this over with. And here's the story, ladies and gentlemen. He and his girlfriend, they're adults, but they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and they had set up a camp, a little tent right here at the water's edge. They had spent the night fishing in this little pond behind me here in Ohio County, Kentucky. He said at about midnight I'm do as best as I can, from right over in this area, the road that comes in here, right in those woods, he said, listen, I'm a country boy, and I've heard coyotes sound off, and coyotes do not scare me. And he said, I've heard, packs of coyotes, and it's normal. We hear this at night, squatching as I do. It's nothing to hear a pack of coyotes, sometimes sound like 15, 20 or more. He said, this sounded like literally a convention of coyotes. It sounded like 100 coyotes over here in that area just began to go off at the same time. It was so loud, so many of them, and so unusual. He said, my girlfriend and I got up from fishing on our chairs and walked over here by the tent, and we're looking in that direction. And he said, my girlfriend said, what in the world's going on? And he said, I've never heard anything like this. And they went on for several seconds, and he just could not believe the overwhelming howls, the mass amount of the voices. And again, many times he mentioned 50 or more. Now that's unbelievable and unusual, but the man was just standing here fidgeting and pointing, and his voice was breaking, and he was telling this story. And then he said after about 3 minutes of that, then from back here in this corner of the woods near the edge of the lake right here came this unbelievable loud screaming, piercing howl. He said you could feel it in your chest. How many times have we heard this? And he said it just broke the silence of the night. And he said instantly the coyote stopped, instantly to a T. Every voice stopped. This thing made a howl. He said he didn't know that anything had that much breath and could make a sound that long and that loud. You can imagine at midnight echoing across this water. It was a horrific, terrifying sound. He and his girlfriend clutched each other, and then came total silence. I remember the man standing here telling me as he was looking around and fidgeting, he said, then was the scaredest of all. The total silence of knowing that that amount of coyotes was on the way out, the road out, and that something that coyotes gave attention to and were afraid of came from right over there on the other side of this small lake. And then total silence. Then you didn't know where they were or what was going on. His girlfriend and he retreated into the tent, sitting right in this area. He said we were armed with, I believe he said he had a kitchen knife, was it a kitchen or a fillet knife, and maybe a box cutter. That's all they had. They weren't armed, and they happened to have that in the tent. And he said we gathered together in the tent and got these weapons out. He said we didn't know what to do. We were totally terrified. And then came the sound. Something came walking right here, right up to this location. I just don't want to show. Something came right up to the tent and began to walk around the tent. And he could hear large bipedal steps, 2 steps, not an animal, not 4 steps, but it was a large stomping steps around the tent as it made low growls, like similar to a lion that he had heard on TV or at the zoos. And it went around the tent and they were petrified. The girlfriend was crying, wanting to leave. He said, we can't leave the tent at this time. It did this for several seconds. And I'm trying to remember, I believe he said it touched the tent one time. And then he never heard it walk away. It just went total silence. He said, I cannot tell you how afraid we were. He said, I cannot tell you how we felt. It was utter terrifying. It scared us to death. He said after a time he could not contain her anymore. They made a break for the vehicle. They got in and sped out of here dangerously fast and left this place. Now back to the gentleman. I said, sir, that's an awesome story. And we're going to stay here tonight. I've got my thermal camera and we've got some audio listening devices. My brother's got a 38 long barrel pistol. I've got a 44 Magnum at that time. Let's stay here and squatch. And the gentleman said, absolutely and positively not. I will not return here and I'm certainly not going to stay here. And he urged us not to stay the night here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that lets me know that this full-grown man, a country boy, was scared to death and had seen something and heard something like he had never heard before. No, he didn't see a Bigfoot, but you tell me what he heard come from that sound. You tell me what walked bipedally. You know, people's always trying to put the evidence on us to prove something was. I say the evidence is on you. Prove to me it wasn't. It walked around on bipedal steps, a man and woman who's listening intent, they're focused on every sound, and it walks bipedally. He can hear the stomping steps, the low growl like a lion. We don't have lions here in Kentucky, folks. And he said it touched the tent, and this man would not stay the night. And Glenn and them, they had to leave with him, and we stayed, I believe it was, that night. We didn't have a response that night, but I will now add that this, unknowns to that man, is a known Bigfoot location. This entire mines area has activity. I have taken probably 5 different reports within 3 miles in either direction from this location. He did not know that. And so that was just 2 years ago. Stories like this, these are not reports I've made. He would not be filmed on camera. The man that would not come here today, probably if I'd asked him to come, he was scared. What makes a full-grown man react that way? What makes a man, a country boy raised in the country, react that way, ladies and gentlemen? He experienced something out of the unusual. I believe 100% that Bigfoot is real. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you what it is. I have no idea, but I know it's there. Something is affecting full-grown men into tears. Something affects people to leave their hunting spots where they've hunted all their life and will never return. I have many more stories to come. This is the first of many, and I hope you're enjoying it. I'm going to tell you something like my shirt says. I completely believe, and one day you may too.